Hi everyone, Autumn here. Talk to you about narcissistic abuse. I come to you as always as a life coach and as a person who's shared in this experience, so I understand it all too well. And the pain and the difficulty it is of being in a relationship with someone with narcissistic personality disorder or one of the other cluster B personality disorders. Today I want to talk about something that I feel as though I need to share. And it's probably something you don't want to hear, because I know I didn't want to hear it. I guess it depends on where in the process you are of leaving your narcissistic partner, or where in the process you are of recovering from it. If you're still in the relationship, this is going to be a hard pill to swallow. My aha moment, which was that moment that I could no longer deny what was going on with my partner, my ex-husband. It was that moment that slapped me across the face and made my eyes wake up, open for the first time. The moment that I truly saw the reality of what was going on. The moment that I realized I wasn't to blame. That was a scary moment, to know that I wasn't to blame. Because the truth is, I had taken the blame the entire relationship, and it felt good to take the blame. Because if I was to blame, that meant I had control over the situation. If I was to blame, that meant I could do something different, and I would solve the issues of the relationship. I would be happy again, like I was at the beginning. Of course, at the time, I didn't realize what was going on. I didn't realize that beginning part of a relationship wasn't true, that it was just the idealization phase. I didn't realize that every time my ex-husband came back around into this loving, most awesome partner in the world, that he did that as a consequence or a reaction to wanting or needing something from me, really. The relationship only just ended a few months ago for me, and it's still somewhat raw, although I'm like 90% there. I think because I had started to detach and go to therapy before the relationship actually ended and before I initiated no contact with my ex-husband. You know, I'm 35 years old. When I met my ex-husband, it was only a few years ago. I think it was 33, just turned. And it's hard when you look and you say, how did I get so manipulated? But this is what they do, right? This is how they live their life. There's no way of winning over that. But the moment I woke up, the moment my aha moment happened, it was, I'm not going to lie, totally fucking hard and heartbreaking. What had happened was, we had gone to couples therapy yet again in an attempt to yet again, quote unquote, solve my ex-husband's intimacy issues, because he could not be close and he had major attachment issues from his childhood abuse and neglect. And I had a lot of sympathy for him, and a lot of empathy. And I forgave, and I forgave, and I forgave. And I let him get away with basically anything he wanted to. When he would scream at me, call me names, it was always justified. It was always excused. You made me do it. Or there's an excuse about rage from his childhood, whatever the case was. So we went to couples therapy, and I spoke about this in another podcast video, but I think it warrants me to say it again. And I'm going to say it real quick, not go into the details of it. We went to therapy, my ex-husband came a half hour late. This was our first session with this therapist. We were doing it again. This is shortly before we broke up. And at the end of the therapy session, we only got a half hour because my ex-husband was a half hour late. And my ex-husband was angry with his arms crossed, shooting the evil eye. At the end, he blew up and had a pseudo-rage attack about the fact that apparently I was talking too much and he didn't get a chance to talk. So I got up, I was upset, and I left. I wasn't putting up with it. He had done that to me dozens, 100 times, just left. Just ignored me. But this was the first time I did it, and after I did it, it was as though I had murdered him. That's how much it hurt him, which is interesting, the double standard. So I left, and then 2 days later, I went to go see that same couple's therapist. Now, that couple's therapist was the partner of my husband's individual therapist at the time, so they spoke back and forth. I saw the therapist by myself. I left, and the next day on a weekend, he called me. I think our appointment was on Wednesday. I went back to go see him on Friday, and he called me on Saturday, and he was very concerned. It was so very odd. And he had kind of said to me about what we had talked about in our therapy session and the relationship with Mel, but he made it very clear that he couldn't really say too much. He couldn't say that much. But with a wink and a nod through the phone, that therapist told me a story, quote unquote, about a couple. And basically what he was doing was he was saying, you're the wife and your husband's the husband in the story. And basically what this therapist that I saw a couple times said was, your husband, the guy in the story, the husband in the story, has the worst case of attachment disorder issues that he and this guy's individual therapist, meaning my husband's individual therapist, his partner, the worst case of attachment issues they had ever seen in their entire career. He also said that my husband, and I had heard this prior, but this was the first time I really listened, because I truly didn't fully understand the ramifications. Because like most people in the mental health field, even though I had studied academically psychology, we didn't really learn all the ins and outs of the personality disorders. Just kind of knew the names, the basic symptoms. And he told me, your husband, not your husband, the husband's story, but he said, it's very important you listen. It's very important you know this. The husband in the story, he said, which was my husband, has one of the most textbook cases, he said textbook cases of narcissistic personality disorder, comorbid with borderline personality disorder, and shows traits of antisocial personality disorder, the trifecta. And the therapist said, your husband will never change. He said, I told that woman, your husband will never change. That's what he said. And he said it over and over again. I told her. He wanted to reiterate it. And he knew a lot of information, I'm assuming from the individual therapist of my husband's, had told him. Well, I got off the phone. And that was the moment. That was the moment that all my fears, all my anxieties, all my worries about him, all my chasing after him, all of my convincing myself to forgive him, and on and on and on, this was the moment that it all just melted away. None of it made sense. I want to tell you, if you are truly in a relationship, or you were in a relationship, but let's say you're in a relationship right now and you found this, you're trying to question it, or you were in a relationship and you're thinking about going back, I want you to understand, I want to be what my that couples therapist was to me, I want to be to you. I want you to understand that your partner, either wife or husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever it is that has BPD, MPD, or any of those personality disorders, that they will never change. They will never change. The likelihood of actual long-term change is, 0.001 to 0%. There's some therapies, DBT therapy and other types of therapy that they say can be somewhat effective. Honestly, my background and who I've spoken to, research, it's only effective if the motivation to change is very strong, and if the case of borderline or narcissistic disorder is very mild. And oftentimes what happens is they go through DBT therapy, especially borderlines, and they get better. And the minute they stop, they revert back to old ways. So I want to leave you on that note. I know it's not a happy note. I know it's not a note you want to hear. But your partner will never change. This isn't bipolar. There is no medication for it. This is not a mental illness. And I think that this is really important to understand. This is not a mental illness. This is a personality disorder or trait. Your personality is ingrained. It is the fabric of who you are. It's the framework of your entire person. Without your personality, you wouldn't be you. Without our personalities, we would be drones. Essentially, the personality is the thing that fuels all the other psyche and psychological things. The personality is the thing that's, helping to, because remember, your personality shapes your perception, right? It shapes your perception. And your perception is what shapes you to make decisions and what decisions to make, where to go with your life, who to have sex with, who not to have sex with, who to marry, who not to marry, and all those things. So again, one more time, your partner will never change. I hope you know that I say this with peace and love, that I say this only with the best intention. But I can't even fathom the idea of another person having to go through what I went through. Again, getting involved with a sociopath, psychopath, narcissist, and having them use you and manipulate you and throw you away, and then come back in and hoover you and re-idealize you and have the cycle to go over and over again, especially if you're married. I can't do that anymore, and I don't want to see anybody do that anymore. So I'm going to leave you with that, with the knowledge and the understanding, no matter what you do, no matter how great you are, or no matter how much leeway you give him or her, no matter what you do for them, no matter. I promise you one thing, that you will not win. Your partner will not change. And I know it's a really big bummer, but this can't be solved, really. This is just who they are. And it's been one of the hardest things for me to grasp. The two things that have been hard, of course, is losing my best friend and my husband, who I really, truly thought I was going to have the rest of my life with. We had all these plans together, and the second part was what he just mentioned. And it's hard to see that person for who they really are, that maybe you fell in love with somebody who wasn't as sweet and kind as you thought. So I leave you with that. Once again, your partner cannot change, will not change. And the only thing you can do is move on, have a happy life, and let them go. Because ultimately, they will live a miserable life. None of us have to seek revenge. Believe me, they're going to do it to themselves. All right, I'll talk to everyone later. Namaste.